Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Schabert. I created this podcast to leverage 12 years of osteopathic medical training and over a decade of experience in primary care medicine to help sort through the confusing and often contradictory health information found on the internet. I want to distill all this information down into a form that you can use every day to optimize your health as you move forward through life. So if you are looking to get to life's finish line with the ability to do all the things that you love intact, then this podcast is for you. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button and throw us a like as well. I'd also love it if you would share this episode with people in your life who you believe can benefit from it. It really helps us get this information out to more people. With all that said, let's move on with today's episode. Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast. Today I want to dive back into nutrition science and cover a supplement/nutrition element that is probably one of the most heavily researched ones I've ever covered, and that is omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-3 fatty acids have been on national health radar ever since the 1980s, when research began to show that cultures that consumed a lot more fish had drastically lower rates of cardiovascular disease than cultures that focused more on eating red meats and even poultry and pork. The appropriate question that we've been trying to answer ever since is, what is it about consuming fish that reduces cardiovascular disease? Or is it even the fish itself that is causing these cultures to have lower cardiovascular disease risk? One of the first things we began to look at is the type of fats in fish relative to other meats. In order to understand this, one of the first things we need to talk about are the different types of fats. And really, you can broadly break it down into saturated fat, polyunsaturated fat, and monounsaturated fat. These are really differentiated by chemical structure, but they come from different places. A good example of polyunsaturated fats are vegetable oils, olive oil, and fish oils. Monounsaturated fats are going to be things like avocado oil. You get a little bit of it in coconut oil, but that is more saturated than monounsaturated fat and the like. It had been thought for a long time that monounsaturated fats are going to be your most anti-inflammatory fats, with some polyunsaturated and saturated fats being more pro-inflammatory. It's not nearly that simple, though. And I'm going to kind of stay away from talking about those kind of things as we go through this research, because what I'm really interested in is the data we have on human outcomes with regards to consuming different types of fat. Now, when you break down polyunsaturated fats, the two you will hear about the most are omega-3s and omega-6s. The omega-3s are going to be present in larger amounts in certain vegetarian sources and fish. So the common types of omega-3s that people eat are going to be ALA, DHA, and EPA. ALA is the primary polyunsaturated omega-3 that you're going to find in things like almonds and in olive oil and in, to a lesser extent, in other vegetable oils when omega-3s are present. Now, by contrast, you're going to see EPA and DHA almost entirely coming from fish. And for folks who actually eat some of this, you can get it out of algae. But for the most part, we think that fish oil is high in DHA and EPA because of the fact that they consume some of the algae that produce the stuff. So the first thing I want to talk about is the research we have regarding omega-3s and cardiovascular disease. And there's a lot of this, more of it than I'm going to talk about specifically here. I do want you to check out the National Institutes of Health page summarizing scientific evidence about omega-3s in numerous disease states. I'm going to place a link to it in the description of this video. Feel free to check it out, because there's a lot more in there that I'm going to cover in this video, because I would like to keep it under 3 hours. Okay, with that said, when we talk about evidence for omega-3's effect on cardiovascular disease, some of the best data we have are for two prescription grade medications that are made from omega-3s. The first one is called Leveza, and it is basically a distilled pharmaceutical grade fish oil that is put in a medicated capsule. And this one has been tested repeatedly. We got data very early that Leveza was very effective at lowering triglycerides, a type of harmful cholesterol. Unfortunately, it has largely failed to show benefit at preventing adverse cardiovascular events. The most recent of these trials was called the Origin trial. And in this trial, because there was some signal that omega 3s might be more effective at preventing a second heart attack, stroke, or other major adverse cardiovascular event than it is in primary prevention, they added Leveza in a study to statin therapy for individuals who had already had a adverse cardiovascular event or had known severe coronary artery disease. They had one group on a statin alone plus a placebo and one group on the statin plus Leveza. Unfortunately, what Origin found is there wasn't a statistically significant difference in major adverse events between the Leveza group and the placebo group. There were a number of speculated reasons for this that researchers came up with, including that they didn't think that they went long enough in the study. But nonetheless, it was a bit disappointing. By contrast, Visipa, another fish oil based medication, but this one, they separate out the EPA. So this is a pure EPA delivery mechanism and is giving an individual more EPA than you would get from the therapeutic dose of Leveza. In this one, we looked at primary prevention in high risk individuals who were already on statins and had a triglyceride between 139 and 499. To give you an idea, the upper limit of triglycerides on the majority of lab tests that are done in the United States is 150. So these are individuals with significantly elevated trigs that are already receiving statin medications. And once again, you had one group that was randomized to receive Visipa plus a statin and one group that was randomized to receive a statin plus a placebo. Comparing these two groups at the end of this Reduce It trial showed that the individuals receiving Visipa had a 25% relative risk reduction in major adverse cardiovascular events relative to the group that was receiving a placebo plus a statin. This was a very positive outcome and has led to an indication of treating individuals who are at increased risk for major adverse cardiovascular events with Visipa when their triglyceride levels are 140 and up. When we look at over-the-counter omega-3 supplements, the data is not as robust and it's a little bit more contradictory. We do know that over-the-counter omega-3 fish oil supplements do reduce triglycerides, but we don't have the kind of cardiovascular outcomes data we saw in the Reduce It trial. As a result, there is not a general recommendation by cardiologists to take fish oil when your triglycerides are a little higher than ideal and you're already on a statin. Now, an additional thing we should look at is some of the recently published research regarding types of fat intake and overall long term, what happens with cardiovascular risk. And one of the ones that's rather interesting is if you replace saturated fat with polyunsaturated fats on a calorie per calorie basis, we see a rather substantial reduction in cardiovascular related mortality and major adverse cardiovascular events. The studies that have shown this are observational long-term cohort studies. So this isn't proof of a benefit of eliminating saturated fats and replacing them with polyunsaturated, but it is a significant indication that there is reason to believe that this may be helpful in preventing cardiovascular disease. Included in that NIH page I referenced previously is a link to this research. All right, at this point, I want to take a quick break and remind you I am someone who tries to read all of my comments and respond to as many as I can. If you have additional questions or have any constructive feedback for the information I'm presenting in this video, I would really appreciate it. And I will try and respond. If you have another topic, whether it's in nutritional science or any other part of medicine that you would like to hear information on, I can go ahead and research and see what kind of trial data is out there and comment on it for you. Okay, next, I want to move on to the topic of omega 3 supplementation and dementia risk. We do have some interesting data here. Here, the evidence is that DHA may be beneficial in reducing dementia risk and cognitive decline. EPA doesn't seem to have this effect. What research suggests is that long-term exposure to DHA can reduce the risk of Alzheimer's disease as well as general cognitive decline. Was a recently published analysis of different studies that took a rather clever method to try and evaluate all of the available evidence and came to this conclusion. There was a video produced by another creator that really did a good job of going over all of this available evidence. And so I'm going to put a link to that video in the description of this one. Now, as I mentioned before, there are numerous other conditions that omega 3s can have a positive impact on, including rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, and multiple others. I want to comment a little bit on the evidence on rheumatoid arthritis because there we seem to have the most evidence that omega 3 supplementation with over the counter supplements can have a positive impact, substantially reducing joint pain and swelling in individuals with known rheumatoid arthritis. There is a link to this research in the NIH information that I have linked to in the description of this video. Unfortunately, though, it does not look as though the benefit carries over into osteoarthritis as well, which is far more common. Unfortunately, in osteoarthritis, which is the kind of generally aging related arthritis that we see in so many people, there doesn't appear to be anywhere near as much benefit. Well, that wraps up what I wanted to cover in today's episode. Just so you're aware, I am going to link a omega 3 supplement that is produced by a company called Performance Labs I've become aware of recently. One of the questions I get asked a lot is how do I find supplements that don't have harmful impurities in them? Something I've covered a lot on my channel. And how do I find supplements that actually contain what they say they do? Well, Performance Labs goes to a lot of trouble to have their supplements verified by third-party labs. I have mentioned in previous videos that this is a good way of knowing you're getting what you're bargaining for and nothing else that could be harmful. This isn't the most affordable supplement on the market by any means, but it is one I have confidence in the purity of. I hope you all found this helpful. And if you did, please remember to like, subscribe, and share this video. It really helps me keep doing this and get it out to more people. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you in my next episode.